December 22nd. It's December 22nd, 2024. I'm going to be your host tonight. Hope you're doing well. On this Sunday night, a little bit of a problem getting up and running. What else is new around? You can call into these shows at 709-589. We're in Canada, 4406. I'm Dana. Hope you're doing A-okay. Mary Fallout. James. The famous one-liner, man, oh man. That's what the point of it too, isn't it? Mary Fallout. Bear with me. We're almost good to go. So, small modular reactors. Did you know they don't exist? And so if they don't exist, then what's the point of them, right? If they don't exist, what's the point of them? Well, that's the good question. So it's December the 22nd, just a couple of days till the big madness is all over with. And so should you invest in small modular reactors? Oh, there's two of us. See, I got the Geiger counter screwed up there. We're close to 300 counts per minute just before I went live. These are insane numbers, by the way. I'm tempted to go fix that. Just give me a second. Let me see if I can fix that. That's the way it goes. No, it doesn't exist. There we go. Everything is better. That's a bit better. So that's in real time. So they're really pushing nanonuclear and my goodness, it's hard to get started tonight. Some nights are like that. I think most nights are like that. I couldn't get the recording to work that time. That's why you heard me repeating the date a few times. Okay, so we're almost there. Hope everybody had a good weekend. Hope everybody had a reasonable weekend. Unless you're in the nuclear industry. Then we really don't care about you. Here we go. We're up and running. Right there. Just to get us started. We're almost there. My goodness. So nanonuclear is the same as NuScale, the so-called small modular reactors. They don't even exist. They don't exist. And so the four lights to your right, in a second, these are from the first nuclear reactor that produced power, which was a byproduct. These were breeder reactors. And the idea was to produce plutonium. And we'll try to get to that story. Nanonuclear energy, a new frontier. Investors watch stock prices closely. Recent months, the financial world has turned its gaze towards an emerging and innovative sector, nanonuclear energy. Nano, of course, is metric, right? In the United States, it's not metric. Just bear with me. I used to always get my sneezes in doubles. When I'm sitting in front of the camera, I typically only get one sneeze. In recent months, the financial world has turned its gaze. This has been going on for 6 years, the small modular reactor scam. And the idea is get a bunch of hype, get unsuspecting, good-natured investors to put their money in something they will never get a return on. This is absurd what we're talking about. We're talking about billions of dollars every couple of months stolen from kind-hearted people who worked legitimately all their life and snatched away by a vicious parasite known as the nuclear industry, and particularly the stock market. The best way to describe them, the only way you can describe these people are parasites. And monstrous parasites who don't give a shit about anything. Not even themselves. They just care about being a scam after scam after scam. And climate change concerns. So conflating so-called climate change and small modular reactors, which don't exist and are not going to exist, the same as fusion, because geothermal is 1 billion times more appropriate. It exists, it's easy to build, there's no adverse side effects from the emissions, it doesn't kill everything with replicating cells compared to nuclear. And nanonuclear is a company with $14 million cash flow, not billions, which is what it's going to take to bring anything to fruition when it comes to stupid nuclear, right? And so they're screaming, coming from every direction. And every Christmas, for at least 6 years, we've seen the same routine with fusion and with small modular reactors, where this big hype shows up, and the stock market and the nuclear community wants a big payday every Christmas. And they want billions of people's money that there's no way they're going to get a return on. You're not getting a return at nanonuclear, of all places, or NuScale or the rest of them. Technology focuses on compact, efficient reactors aimed to provide safer. Again, this is not even a conjecture. This is a blatant lie. It's a blatant propaganda. It's blatant deception. It's absolutely a criminal act to even suggest that there's any kind of an ultra-safe nuclear. That's right, James. An ultra-safe nuclear, of course, they have no product, they have no land, they're not intending to build a pilot project or anything like that. And they've raked in a lot of money. And they were one of the corporations that attacked me for many months. Last year or the year before? It was vicious attacks up on me. Calling me up, and I mean they were vicious. They're out of Washington, right? Aim to avoid a safer, like, if you haven't got a product, you can't make these exorbitant claims about it. There is no small modular reactor. There is no fusion reactor. It's 100% a Ponzi scheme meant to lull unsuspecting investors to invest in a corporation which has no product, no hope of a product. The best you can hope for is 30 years down the road. Which investor is willing to put their money? It's equivalent to putting your money into a goose that lays golden eggs. Somebody says, hey, I got a goose that lays golden eggs. You should buy stocks. You're like, holy shit, I'll do it. And then when you tell all your friends what you've done, they're all going to laugh at you, right? Because it's blatantly obvious. But nuclear, because it's such a secretive death cult, is the best way to describe it. The best way to describe nuclear is a disease factory. More sustainable power solutions. Like, first off, you're talking about Small modular reactors, so you need plutonium mixed oxide fuel, high SA grade fuel, weapons grade fuel, which is illegal, by the way, in Canada, United States. Yeah, they're trying to change the laws to make it illegal, and they probably will. But they don't have the facilities, they don't have the abilities, they don't have the technologies. They got companies that are allegedly going to create the technology, but we hear this all the time with nuclear, and it never comes to fruition. It's the equivalent of a goose that lays the golden egg. And anybody that buys into it is because they were lulled into that complacency by ruthless scumbags, degenerates and monsters and criminals. These are criminals and murderers. There's no other way to describe the nuclear community as only as criminals and murderers. Serial killers, really. So you need this incredible lethal fuel. You're going to produce 5 times more when you scale it up to a conventional reactor. Except you're talking about mixed oxide fuel. We don't know how to deal with this. And when it's splitting atoms, the typical atoms released radioactive fallout from the fuel pools around every single nuclear plant on the planet, which happens to be surrounded by farms worldwide. And then the emissions from the fuel pools all day, every day, on a scale that would horrify you if you could visually see it. This material is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Imagine what this is going to do to your children. And it's also going to be much more wicked for your parents and your grandparents. It's going to wreck their health immediately and permanently. This is a technology that every person on the planet should be rallying against with every fiber in their body. It should be rejected by anybody with even a fraction of a moral compass. If they understood what's really going on at every nuclear power plant's fuel pools, all the fuel, you take it out of the reactor after 14 months, now it's splitting atoms into the environment that you can't contain for millions of years. And in the 80-year history of it, they still don't have a solution for it, but they produce so much worldwide. We don't need a nuclear meltdown. We don't need a nuclear war. We don't need nuclear accidents. We just need nuclear fuel splitting atoms, and eventually you exterminate every species on the planet. That's the skinny on this. So you're going to produce 5 times more high-level fuel, the fuel rods itself, 35 times more high level, and high level is lethal compared to the fuel rods, which is considered absurdness, because it melts your organs within about 20 minutes. The other stuff will kill you in a couple of weeks or a couple of months or a couple of years, which is the high level. Then you're going to produce, which is 35 times more than a conventional reactor. And you're going to produce 30 times more intermediate level, which is still lethal if you get it in your body. No matter how, like just the radioactive fallout, it gets in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells and builds these sarcophagus around it. We call it a tumor, right? And this is true for every species. But after Fukushima, we've seen cancer that jumped from species to species. We've seen cancer as a biological weapon, turned into a biological weapon for all the species and insects out there. And you too, and your loved ones, and your friends, and your families. Because of the mutation from the nuclear contamination. And these very powerful organizations, like the International Atomic Energy Agency / United Nations, has now compromised the future of all species and all humans. That's not an opinion, okay? That's a fact that is recognized by all the academics who would rather cut their own throats than say anything bad about the nuclear industry. Because the nuclear industry is so powerful, it controls your universities, and I'm not talking about one or two, I'm talking about every one of them. All your medias. And you might think that's crazy, but it's simply not. And all the key positions in your government. It's truly a death cult that have now captured our planet and is snuffing out all the species on this planet as we talk. And we can back that up, and we have endlessly with the documentation. So why, and then when you're talking about small modular reactors and fusion, which doesn't exist, but geothermal actually does. If you took one hundredth of the energy they're putting into the small modular reactors and into the fusion, and applied it to the geothermal, we can get rid of gas, oil, coal, and nuclear plants. Tomorrow. Because geothermal, anybody can build it. Any engineering company in any little tiny hick town, any city, any community can build a geothermal plant. Any community can get together, pull their money together, and start building a geothermal plant there. When they turn it on, their energy bills will drop by 100. It'll be, for every dollar they spend now, it'll only cost a penny. And this industry now has destroyed the integrity of every species on the planet. But it drives me nuts when I see the constant propaganda manipulating and deceiving, coercing the good-natured, hard-working investors who worked all their life and is retired and is trying to grow a few pennies on their life savings so they can live at their retirement is stolen from them by the despicable nuclear industry, by the fake, hideous and monstrous, laughable small modular reactor organizations and the dummy fusion corporations. And there's been over 100 of each showed up in the last 5 years, and they all got a different design. So that tells us they don't have a friggin' clue. They don't have a bloody clue. And all of the designs are basically based on a design from 1904, so there's nothing innovative whatsoever. And I just, in my conscience, I can't sit in silence and not come out and vehemently try to warn everybody of this predatory industry that has no right to, it has zero right to exist. They can't quantify a single reason why they should exist. As of late 2023, several companies involved in nanonuclear research and development. Nanonuclear. You can't have nanonuclear, by the way. Right? It's meant to lull people, again, into complacency like ultra-safe reactors and NuScale. And development has begun attracting significant attention from investors. The speculative nature of this young industry has led to volatile stock prices, which were artificially inflated by Sprout Investments in Toronto, Canada, who bought up the physical yellow cake uranium from the mines and created an artificial demand, which started to raise the prices up on uranium. And then they came out with these small modular reactor versions and said there's going to be a lot of demand. But the small modular reactors are not going to be working on, if they did come along, would not be working on fuel from your mining. They're working on fuel that you've already created, which is reprocessed. And the releases from these reprocessed fuels, like from Donneray in the United Kingdom, from Sellafield in the United Kingdom, from The Hague in France, have just those three facilities have been considered the emissions from a contaminated Europe and the Arctic. This is not a technology that should even exist ever under any circumstances on any planet because it's man-made, and there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against it. There's nothing there. We don't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Our body attacks it for the rest of our lives. Every species, no matter what it is, will attack it with white blood cells, and eventually it'll kill us. It'll destroy our health in increments over time. Eventually you'll build a tumor around it, a sarcophagus, which is a tumor. That's what a tumor is, a sarcophagus built by your body around a foreign object in your body. And the cancer epidemics began in the 70s. Like the evilness of this industry, and we've done quite a few videos on that, but you just can't keep up with how evil this industry actually is. Every facet of it, and when they go out and steal everybody's life savings through stocks, in a product that doesn't exist, that's not going to exist. Every one of them says, oh, we're going to have a product in the... Like they're saying they're going to have a product in by 2028. They don't even have an application into the regulatory agencies, which could take 4, 5, 10 years to go through before you finally get approval to build a test reactor. They'll build that at one of the national laboratories. That's going to take another 10, 12 years if we're lucky, if we're unlucky enough. And then you got to get the kinks out of that. You're looking at another decade before you can bring it to production. And the small modular reactors that they're building, allegedly going to build in Canada, calling them small is absurd because they're talking about 24-story buildings. You're not going to put it on the back of a pickup truck or a flat deck or a transport truck or a train and ship it anywhere. You're not going to build it in factories. All of it's meant to lull people into a complacency because this industry is dying. Just in 2024, just in a 12-month period, well, like the total history of nuclear is 365 gigawatts currently, worldwide. Solar power this year just allows you, not in 80 years, but in 12 months, is over 660 gigawatts, almost double the total capacity of nuclear. This is why you see every scam in the book. I can't sit in silence. And I really didn't want to do a show tonight. I'm not feeling good at all. But I also can't sit in silence. I can't justify being sick as an excuse for not doing a show. Because I know there's 1 or 2 or 3 or 1,000 investors will find this and watch it and say, holy shit, I almost invested in the small modular reactors. Holy shit, I almost invested in fusion. And I for the life of me, if you took all these academics and try to drag them to Fukushima, they would kill you. They would tear the eyes out of your head, screaming, before you can get them into Fukushima, because they know better. That's only where the homeless go. I can't go there. I'm a scientist. These are cowards. The people that are the small modular reactor companies that are promoting stocks are cowards on a scale that the average person has no concept of. They're revolting. They're despicable. They're real life monsters. They look like me or you. They ain't got any of the attributes. They're worthless. The most worthless humans is the pro-nuclear community. Raising questions about the stability and potential of these investments. Way down the story, you get that little narrative, but then given this promise of reducing carbon emissions, you'll keep up with the propaganda. They got to put out for plausible deniability, stuff like that. But the reality of it is their job is to suck you in to this industry which will devour. And ultimately, this industry will devour everything on this planet. Every species will have to die for this industry to survive a little bit longer. And if you close down every nuclear plant on the planet right now, the radioactive fallout from all the fuel pools alone will still exterminate all the species eventually. Every one of us. That's the truth. That's the ugly, stupid truth about an industry that should never exist. And they know what they're doing. They don't got no illusions. The advancement of nano-nuke, what the hell are you talking about, the advancement? Could disrupt the global energy market. Like, what are you talking about? By making energy production more localized and accessible. Again, this is the most empty words conceivable. As governments worldwide prioritize clean energy initiatives, like calling nuclear the most, which happens to be the most resource intensive and the dirtiest industry in human history, period, bar nothing. That even the smallest, a single atom, an anthropogenic, man-made radioactive fallout, once it's sequestered in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, you're on a countdown to being sick and eventually dying from that. Every bird, every insect, every mammal, every animal, there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. And I have so many distractions. I'm under siege so long. And for me to come here and focus and tell the story just blows my mind sometimes. And it's because of the absolute urgency of this story is the only reason that I'm able to do it. The world needs to make it stand. This is Earth's last stand. This is Earth's last stand. And this is our one chance to get it right. Because the future of every species that might survive this depends upon it. And certainly the future of humanity depends upon it. And this industry is intently trying to exterminate everything, and most likely is going to succeed. As government worldwide prioritize clean energy, like how can you call something whose emissions that you can't contain for millions of years is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison to everything on the planet with replicating cells? It's hard to wrap your mind around. There's so many evil people that call themselves journalists, that call themselves academics, that call themselves scientists, that call themselves professors, that call themselves doctors, that call themselves engineers. The nuclear engineers, their criteria for building a nuclear plant is, where's all the prime farmland? Let's build it there because the emissions can't be contained. We can't have them gathering up. So if we do it in prime farmland, we'll be shipping food out all the time and the radiation doesn't build up locally. And they don't get discovered for being the monstrous coward that they actually are. For those venturing into this death machine, expert analysts suggest careful consideration, extensive research, and never include my stuff, never include my narrative. Because that's the end of the industry when you put my narrative there. If the investor comes here and watches my stuff, there's zero possibility they're going to invest in nuclear. There's zero possibility. Because the investors are not stupid. For rapid development, readiness for rapid developments. Like, what are you talking about? The only rapid development is the looting of the stock holders who don't understand 3 weeks after they invest in nuclear, this dump and recycle starts again. The coward industry. After all these years, we can say with absolute confidence this is a coward industry. These are cowards. Very dangerous, vicious cowards on top of that. As the field of nanonuclear energy continues to evolve, the financial community eagerly monitoring stock movements, the financial community doing a pump and dump every 2 or 3 weeks, artificially come out and claim nuclear is the savior of humanity, and the stocks will soar for a couple of weeks, and then it'll crash because it's all built. It's a house of cards. It's intended to do that, by the way, right? So they can cash in every 2 or 3 weeks, which is exactly what they see them doing now for Christmas and New Year's. They just done the nanonuclear. This is the third time in a month and a half the artificially inflated nanonuclear's worth. They don't have a product. They don't have a piece of land. They have no intentions. They only got $14 million cash flow. And they suck up the money. They just loot that money. And they come out and get investors to invest again. It's revolting, and they're not the only ones. Every small module, there's over 100 of them out there. And almost 100 fusion companies doing the exact same thing to the unsuspecting stockholders. And the stock market regulatory agencies were captured a long time ago, have no intentions of holding anybody accountable or exposing the scam. As the field of nanonuclear energy continues to evolve, like that's schizophrenic to say that there's any kind of evolving going on in the nuclear industry. It's a pump and dump with the stocks every 2 or 3 weeks. I'm surprised. I'm a little bit surprised that some of the stockholders who lost their life savings hasn't went looking for revenge. You know it's coming. Increasing environmental concerns, nanonuclear technology. Like, you can't conflate nuclear and environmental at the same time. Nuclear is the curse of the environment. The radioactive fallout in the forests and the meadows is full body X-rays for every species, which means they don't reproduce and they die off. And it's true for the biota, it's true for the fungus, and it's true for the bacteria. And you can't have food or plants or trees or anything else that are healthy and when you don't have fungus or bacteria. And for the bees and the pollinators, you're talking about radioactive pollen. And so what's going to happen to those colonies? They're going to disappear, right? And when the pollinators disappear, guess what happens? Increasing environmental concerns. Nanonuclear energy centered on compact reactors, which are 24 stories high, 240 feet tall buildings. Calling that a compact reactor? Fukushima reactors were massive. They were 19 stories. They were 190 foot. The small modular reactors are going to be 50 feet taller. Presents a potential game changer in clean energy. Like the people that wrote that, they should get life in jail for writing these types of laws. They couldn't, and the industry couldn't exist without these types of laws. The pros and cons. The pros, potential to drastically cut carbon emissions. So they fearmonger everybody about carbon. And guess what carbon does? It grows trees and plants and humans and insects and birds and biota and fungus and bacteria. If we got no carbon, we look like the moon. Carbon is just recycled immediately back into the ecosystem. Higher efficiency with lower operation costs. In fact, the studies done by former nuclear regulatory commissioners showed that it would be at least double the price of a conventional reactor when you scale up to small modular reactors. So to suggest that it would be lower operating costs, and you're talking about plutonium mixed oxide fuel. You're talking about plutonium mixed oxide fuel. So the emissions from the normal nightmare are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So plutonium mixed oxide, which is reclaimed uranium plutonium, you're going to put that through a chain reaction again. Means you're talking about 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison and radioactive fallout. So after 14 months or whatever, you take the fuel out of the small modular reactor, say it does eventually exist, you put that in the fuel pool, the emissions coming out of that, invisible snowstorms covering the entire planet from every single fuel pool on the planet. Every day. Gas, oil, and coal emissions, carbon doesn't cover the whole planet. The emissions fall really close. And that's why you see all kinds of trees and growth nearby. But ultimately, you destroy the bacteria, the fungus in the soil, and eventually everything goes downhill. The focus on clean energy initiatives, but our governments worldwide is driving significant research and development in nanonuclear technologies. The focus on, this was the United Nations promoting, which is a military-industrial complex, and can't have their nuclear weapons or the tritium that they need for their nuclear weapons without nuclear. They are nobody's friends, certainly not yours, or any species on this planet. Nano is a unit prefix meaning 1/billionth. These reactors are 240 feet tall, 24-story buildings. Using the word nano is absurd. Recyclable materials to further reduce environmental impacts. Again, this is absurdness. Using alternative fuel, which is plutonium mixed oxide fuel. The worst thing can happen to a planet is release the emissions from that. I'm begging this planet to come to their senses. You got 80 years down the rabbit hole. It's time to come to your senses. There's nothing recyclable out of nuclear that doesn't harm you eventually. Whether this technology can deliver on its potential and overcome the challenges it faced remains to be seen. The conclusion. When it comes to nuclear, I always go to the last paragraph. And the author is a highly respected author and a thought leader. Joseph Berkey. He's a thought leader. My goodness. If there's such thing as reincarnation, he'll come back as a shit fly. And here's another scumbag, Claire Coutuni. to tune a hole. Miliband's disastrous go slow on nuclear will be Labour's greatest mistake. The government's risk going into election 2029 with bills which would have shot up to pay for the Energy Secretary's ideological 2030 target. Like the bills, what they're going to do with nuclear in the United Kingdom, for instance, or Australia, is they're going to have to raise the price of the final product so high, nobody will be able to buy it. And they're going to have to keep that price for 60 years to try to pay off. Like France just turned on their first reactor. It took them 25 years. It's 12 years behind schedule. 12 years. And the money they spent, they could have tripled the energy with geothermal. What you do when the wind doesn't blow? Well, the wind always blows. If it's not blowing right here, and you show the smoke coming straight up, right? But go 2 miles down the road, and the wind's blowing. Go 5 miles up in the hills, the wind's blowing. Go 5 miles the other way, the wind's blowing. If you spread your windmills out, then the wind is always blowing. One of them might not be blowing in one spot because there's a bit of a doldrum, but the wind is always blowing somewhere, particularly on the hills and on the mountains. And so, like, the same narrative over and over and over, we've run into it hundreds of thousands of times. What do you do when the wind doesn't blow? Well, hopefully we throw clear off a fucking cliff or something. Like, it's absurd. It's absurd how evil this industry is, and there's nobody out there. There's no checks and balances. And then so-called checks and balances, which has no sovereignty over any country, the United Nations, International Atomic Energy Agency, UNSCLEAR, ERPA, the IPRC, these are all UN. You got these four major organizations will get together, and they'll all back each other's narrative up. But they're the same organization. Why is it so easy to be a scumbag? France's most powerful reactor comes online. France adds first nuclear reactor in 25 years to the grid. 12 years later than originally planned, and 4 times the price. And France is the only country, only spot on the planet that has a president and a prime minister. And France in 2024 has gone through 3 prime ministers. Instead, they should be putting the president in jail. Because clearly the president is the person that's causing all of this. France's most stupidest nuclear reactor comes on stream after 12-year delay and 4 times the cost. How can you call something 12 years behind a delay? How can you use that word? How can you be so idiotic to even utter a word like that, a delay? After a plethora of technical setbacks led to a 12-year delay and a 4-fold increase in the project's overall cost. It's not like they didn't know that. It'll probably take them twice as long to build the next one. But nothing's too good for nuclear. Nuclear, whatever it wants, it can have. And everybody else be damned. A great moment for the country, says the president. 12 years late and 4 times the cost is a great moment for the country. If that's not the stupidest statement conceivable, what actually is? Calling it produce low carbon energy. Like, it's the most resource intensive industry in human history. It's at least 4 times more resources used to build just to build nuclear. And then once you take the fuel out of the reactor, it's splitting atoms into the environment 24 hours a day. The French government itself, EDF, called the event historic. Yeah, historic scam. Where you robbed the ratepayers, charged them 4 times what you said it was. And if you wanted to, you could have built geothermal, all of it up and running in the first 2 years. Not like you're talking 25 years down the road. 12 years later than what they originally estimated. 4 times the cost. And they have this absolute contempt for the population. They call it a historical event. 12-year delay and a 4-fold increase. You know it's more than that. Iran continues the pursuit of nuclear bombs. Well, do they got a choice? Do they actually got a choice? Land, sea, and air embargoes now for decades and decades and decades. They haven't attacked anybody in that period of time. They have 48 military bases on their borders from the United States, Britain, and France, and Israel, who've done nothing but to attack every human and child in that country. The 4-day light bulbs changed the world. Idaho's national historical first step in a nuclear power electricity. One of the saddest stories in human history, 1951. A quiet sagebrush desert of Idaho and a quiet dead sagebrush from radioactive fallout in Idaho. 4 light bulbs flickered to life on a cold December afternoon, 1951. It seemed like a simple flick of the switch was actually... And so the way they write these stories, it's hard to imagine they're not monsters. A modest brick building become the birthplace of nuclear-generated electricity. That should have been scrapped right away and dig a geothermal plant. It would have lit 400,000 bulbs. The whole idea of it was to produce plutonium. And an experimental breeder reactor, the majority of them melted down after that, right? A pioneer facility that helped lay the groundwork for the nuclear age. Well, the nuclear age, there's a stopwatch, and when it stops, every species is gone, just from the radioactive fallout. If you understood how much they hate your guts and your children and your friends and your families and your puppies and everything else, was located at the Idaho National Reactor Testing Station, now the Idaho National Disease Factory, built on one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the Idaho, isn't it? A sprawling facility established by the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, which they got rid of because it was in a conflict of interest, to develop and test nuclear reactor technologies. Yeah, their nuclear reactor was about producing fission products for weapons and more weapons that they can't use on top of that. The experimental breeder reactor, the EBR-1. The Rico Fermi reactor, experimental breeder reactor, melted down. The Santa Susana reactor melted down. The SL-1 melted down. Constructions at EBR, that's just in North America, began in 1949, spearheaded by the most dangerous creature on the planet, a scientist. The most ruthless creature on the planet is an academic and scientist. They're the most likely to kill everything because they work at it really hard, don't they? The goal was ambitious, to demonstrate the viability of breeder reactors, which could revolutionize nuclear energy by producing more fuel than they consume. Now, Pakistan is trying to build their own breeder reactor so they can produce the fuel. And the emissions from the stuff that they're not going to use is released directly into the environment, which attacks everything with replicating cells. It ends up worldwide. You can't have nuclear and a species on this planet eventually. Natural uranium is composed of about 99% uranium-238, which gets bombarded with neutrons and turns into neptunium plutonium-239. We're designed to transform uranium-238 into plutonium-239, a fissionable material, and nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against this emissions. Absorbed high-energy neutrons, resulting in the formation of neptunium-239, which quickly decays into plutonium. About 2.35, so about 2.4 days. So there's 10 half-lives. Just bear with me. So you've done about 10 half-lives. So that's 20 odd days, right? Mind you, there's no exact science on any of this. I screwed up here. Wait for it. Firda Neptunium is the best way to put this. There's actually models of the radioactive fallout of the Neptunium-239. Covers the whole planet. That model up there is 20 days and 21-day models. It quickly decays into plutonium. So say you ingested the Neptunium-239. A couple days later, a week later, it decays to plutonium. And plutonium killed all the animals in all the studies. Yeah, that's in a laboratory, but this is true in nature too. It was named after the devil because of those particular attributes. So Fukushima was the death sentence anyway for everybody and every species on this planet. And unless we come up with solutions, and we can't even have a possibility of that without a conversation. And we can't have a conversation because of the censorship, but the industry is able to censor you and me. And that's how they make a living. They make a living just destroying the future of humanity and the species. Should you avoid stocks like the stupid, idiotic, moronic, dummy small modular reactors and the idiotic fusion reactors because they do not exist, so it's a scam. Which is the name of the video tonight, isn't it? Because it's so important to get that message out there. I changed the title of the video at the last minute to reflect the poll. In the hopes that some of the investors out there won't put their money into this idiot technology and lose their life savings. Because everybody puts their money in the small modular reactors will lose their life savings. The nuclear industry will cash in their stocks, steal your money, and then you sell your stocks, and then it'll come back a week later and buy your stocks for next to nothing, and the whole cycle repeats itself over and over and over. And we've been showing it for 13 years. Post-Fukushima, we've been showing it constantly every friggin' week for 13 years. Pump and dump. The moment of first light, December the 20th, that's the day everybody should be entitled to spit on a nuclear scientist. 1951. It should be a law worldwide that everybody has to find a nuclear scientist and spit on them on the December the 20th of each year. That should be a law. That should be the same as the charters of human rights. You should legally be obliged to find a nuclear scientist and spit on them. In fact, they should be hung by their feet December 20th of every year. Every nuclear scientist, nuclear academic, publicly be hung by their feet all day. And we should be, on our GPS should be like a little dot where we got to show up. We'd be allowed to take a few hours off work to go there and spit on a nuclear scientist or a nuclear science academic. You got no idea how much he likes that idea. The real excitement for the team lay in verifying the reactor's primary objectives, demonstrating the efficiency of the breeder process and conversion of uranium-238 into plutonium-239, which means there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to survive the exposures from it. The following day, the experimental breeder reactor, experimental, like 80 years later, still an experiment, right? Achieved an output of 100 kilowatts, enough to power the building's electrical systems, proving that nuclear power could provide practical amounts of energy. No, the idea was to convert the steam left over into energy to lull you into complacency of accepting it. And they got a real science to that, don't they? How they can rob you of your future and your health. All the nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. So they can poison you everywhere. In your supermarkets, on your vacations, in your restaurants, in your home. Everywhere you go, this industry will try to poison you. The reactor's ability to produce more fuel than it consumed hinted at a sustainable nuclear future. It's only sustainable. The nuclear's... There's no species out there that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. It's guaranteed to make everything and everybody sick. In 1953, the experimental breeder reactor, or disease factor as we like to call them, achieved another historical milestone. It became the first reactor to use plutonium as a fuel source. And then the clock was ticking down to the extermination of all species worldwide. And despite these advancements, interest in breeder reactors waned in the 1960s, and the discovery of vast uranium deposits and the development of more efficient enrichment techniques reduced the urgency for the monstrous breeder technology. That don't mean they gave it up. Additionally, concern about the proliferation risk associated with plutonium dampened enthusiasm for widespread adoption. Japanese city, which is a nuclear wasteland in Fukushima prefecture, where they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. 30 million one-ton bags. 30 million. Massive one-ton bags. Is going after people because they didn't sort their garbage. And they're going to publicly name and shame people that are living in a nuclear wasteland because they didn't sort their garbage. It's hard to rationalize there's so many evil people on the planet until you look at nuclear, then you realize how many is actually out there. And every academic on the planet worked this out, you know. They could have come out and spoken, but they didn't, did they? City officials in Fukushima will be able to inspect refuge bags to identify the culprits. Let me show you pictures from this same place. This is the same city, by the way, where they have 3,000 Geiger counters that don't work to lull people into staying there, to trick people into staying in the nuclear wasteland. This is the same, like 30 million one-ton bags. This story is absurd. And this industry really doesn't have a right to exist. For them to exist, they have to exterminate everybody on the planet. Every species on the planet. That's the fruition of nuclear. It can only exist by exterminating everything on the planet. 30 million of these one-ton bags. 30 million. If you take a one-ton bag, it can fit in the back of a one-ton pickup truck. You know, the big one-ton pickup trucks on the road? So 30 million one-ton pickup trucks, bumper to bumper, is 5 rows of traffic around the entire planet. Like, they're so insane. They're growing food right alongside of one-ton bags of radiation, but they're not going to check that. They're not going to name and shame everybody that didn't get rid of their one-ton bags of radiation. 30 million of them. They're growing food in a nuclear wasteland within sight of nuclear meltdowns, right alongside of tens of thousands of one-ton bags of radiation. And Fukushima City, the city where they're going to do it, has 3,000 of Geiger counters that don't measure counts per minute, like my Geiger counter, because if you did, everybody would run away. They measure it in microsieverts. And they don't even measure it to microsieverts because the bag's criteria is 100,000 atoms per kilogram, which is not reflected in any of these fake Geiger counters. I mean, they're growing food right alongside of one-ton bags of radiation. You tell me that this industry has a morsel of conscience. Not a fucking morsel, excuse the language. Taking the train, you got to go past millions of one-ton bags of radiation. You got to drive past millions of one-ton bags of radiation, take your kids to school, And you're so complacent, you're so stupid, you stay there. You drive around a city with 3,000 Geiger counters, and yet you stay there in the city. You let your kids live there. Every parent there should be arrested for child abuse. Residents of a Japanese city may have to endure public named and shamed if you do not follow the rules about bin inspections, separations. In a land of 30 million one-ton bags, which is only 3% of the land that they scratched up the topsoil on. So, imagine if you only cleaned 3% of your dishes every day. That's all you clean. Imagine if your car, you only put 3% of the oil in your car that it needs. Imagine if you only drank 3% of the water you should drink every day, or ate 3% of the food you need every day to survive. What eventually happens? It's even worse for nuclear. Anybody who lives in Fukushima City is a well-disciplined idiot. But to come out and harass the victims in a nuclear wasteland is almost too much to bear. Those in Fukushima have been told they must work harder to ensure they do not make the mistakes. Yeah, well, you got to drive past millions of one-ton bags to get to the bins. One-ton bags of radiation. Argentina moves forward with a small modular reactor, secure energy sovereignty. That's not what it's about, is it? Will help turn the country into a global artificial intelligence hub. It's the most ludicrous assertion conceivable. For me to make this picture is the same amount of energy as it took to charge your telephone from almost flat. And sometimes I'll make 400 of these pictures a day. But I'm using them as a weapon to attack an industry that ultimately will exterminate every species on the planet, bar nothing. Hello, everybody. Should you avoid stocks like small modular reactors and fusion stocks because they do not exist, so it's a scam? And I'm sitting there thinking about the poll, and I was like, how do I get one, if only one investor finds this video, how do I stop him from investing or just reconsidering investing in the biggest scam in human history right now is small modular reactors and fusion? Because by pretending that might exist, you're ignoring all the technology that does exist and is way more applicable and a billion times better solution than nuclear could ever be. Because nuclear is dying, and now they're willing to take the whole planet with them, because that's the way it is anyway. The potential for an artificial intelligence development is so vast that traditional energy sources will not be enough to meet this new demand. Traditional energy sources. Well, geothermal can meet the demand. But this is an industry, they're the very last people that should be allowed to have artificial intelligence, is the nuclear industry. That's why we are convinced that nuclear energy will experience a revival worldwide. Well, first off, the small modular reactors don't exist, so why are you putting all your eggs in that basket? When there's oodles of renewable technologies that are sustainable and will do a better job at least a decade quicker than nuclear could dream of doing it. Unless the French builds it, then you got a couple of decades. There is no nuclear renaissance. This year, like, worldwide, there's 4,800 roughly gigawatts of energy, like gas, oil, and coal. Nuclear is 365 gigawatts. Renewables this year alone, just one type of renewables, solar, wind, or solar, was almost 660 gigawatts came online in 12 months. 12 months. And then, like, the technology is 40% more each year. So it's 40% more than last year. Last year was 40% more than the year before. And we're on like geothermal literally doesn't even barely exist in the new renewables each year, because they won't, like, they'll allocate $6 million to geothermal and $6 billion to small modular reactors and $6 billion more, 50 billion more to fusion. Which fusion has been at this for over 50 years. They're no closer now than they are then. And then the technology that they're hoping will enable fusion is the most ludicrous plan conceivable. It's basically equivalent to somebody who's never played golf before and hitting the golf ball and driving it across their country the first time you hit a ball. It's simply not going to happen in your lifetime or anybody else's, because there's too many other resources that eventually will come to fruition that are ready to go. Geothermal is ready to go. And then hydrogen, if you stop looking at nuclear, we can start producing hydrogen, which would be perfect for everything. Planes and jets and boats and bikes and cars. It's the perfect technology. But the only way they're looking at hydrogen, what they call pink hydrogen, which again is meant to lull you into complacency. It's not pink, it's nuclear. Pink hydrogen is stuff made from nuclear. And that's the most expensive way to make hydrogen, by the way. The most resource-intensive way to make hydrogen is through nuclear. You know, and the thing about energy is the ratepayers are paying for it, right? The ratepayers are always going to want energy, so they're always going to dump the money. So it's not like they got to come up, but what it is, they loot the money, and so then they have to get investors. Because they steal everything. Because there's no one paying attention. There's no checks and balances. They control the opposition. The potential for AI development is so vast that traditional energy sources will not be enough to meet the new demand. Because despite smear campaigns led by some international organizations, smear campaigns, and you know Raphael Grossi's sitting there in the audience, right? Smear campaigns. 865,000 extra cancers after Fukushima in the first year. 13,646 out of 38,000 children with thyroid tumors, which means they're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their life. And before Fukushima, it was 1 in a million. There's 14.2% of every 100,000 children born in Japan, the entire country, need open heart surgery to correct congenital malformation. 6 in 10 Fukushima children with diabetes. Obesity rates doubled in Japan in the first year. Obesity after a major nuclear event is a direct indication of brain damage from radiation. In Canada and the United States, obesity rates now are like 74%. Because they poisoned us with the radioactive fallout, and they never stopped growing food in a nuclear wasteland and shipping it to Canada and the United States. Nuclear is good for one thing, exterminating every species, just a radioactive fallout. Eventually it exterminates every species. He said nuclear energy is the only sufficiently efficient source that can be quickly scaled to keep pace. You're talking about small modular reactors. How can you quickly scale something that doesn't exist? The President, Javier Milei, during the presentation. The event was also attended by Ralphio Grossi, the degenerate Director General. Ralphio Grossi. We got a picture of Ralphio, actually. Bear with me. I can probably find that. Not always the case. It's just really hard for me to comprehend why they're so evil. And the nuclear industry can be prosecuted under the racketeering statutes.
But they can be prosecuted on the racketeering statutes or promoting fraud.
Just listen.
But they can be prosecuted on the racketeering statutes or promoting fraud. Are presenting themselves to medical professionals as an arbiter of truth and as a neutral referee and a reliable referee of the truth. And they know that those medical professionals are relying on journal articles to treat patients, and that if they tell a lie, if they're committing fraud, that they can injure and kill people. So, I believe they can be prosecuted, and not only can they be prosecuted for those injuries, but they can be prosecuted on the racketeering statutes or promoting fraud.
And that's what they done. They promoted fraud, didn't they? Like a banana, like a potato chip, like walking in the sunshine, like sleeping next to somebody, like flying on an airplane. Everybody in the medias and universities and academics and lecturers that put out videos or stories with those connotations can be prosecuted under the racketeering statutes. And every country that's nuclear has those particular statutes. Different versions of them, right? They don't need to be evil, degenerate, hateful scum. That's just built into them. That's who they are. That's just who the nuclear industry actually is. They're just evil, degenerate, mass-murdering psychopaths and scumbags. Because that's who they really are. Deep down inside, everybody knows what I'm saying is true. Being a scumbag comes natural. Anyway, we made it through tonight. I didn't think we were going to get a show in, to tell you the truth. My apologies, I was late on top of that getting everything to work. I just don't know how to give up. 246 counts per minute. Yay. Oh my goodness. James Lucid has put out a couple of songs that cheered me up. I don't know which one to play. He put out two really good songs. He's got two really good ones. One, the Price Anderson, about Price Anderson, which is that one there. Oh, he got out another song. Score. Maybe we'll play that one. I haven't heard that one yet. I like it. And since last week, he's gained over 400 subscribers, folks. That's so awesome, eh? There is hope. There is light at the end of the rainbow. So he's got all this anti-nuclear music, but it's telling a story, right? It tells a story. So we're going to try the Pony. The Pinky Kodaho. I don't know how to pronounce that one. The Meltdown Hose. I just love that, eh? And Sheila Greed is amazing. And he's doing all the graphics, too. So I highly recommend listening to that one. And the new Meltdown Queen got 650 views. That's a fantastic song, by the way. But I haven't heard this song myself, so let's do that. I love surprises when it comes to this kind of stuff. Let's give it a try. I'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow night. Strap yourselves in, hang on. Let me turn it down a little bit. And then we'll adjust the volume.
Life we must defend it, humans must know. For waters flow pure until man brings woe.
Oh, I love it.
Na walk my bed, koro duo gigi duo lo ke rum ka goro. Cosmo koshwe ping shing mo ke tore. Dual mar ping o yong gima magnam. Rains that turn with cries no longer come. Rains that fell, blessings that healed now turn bitter. The soul of the earth abandons life in the sea. Dogi mabe opionam dvokni soa ketongima oke krichoeo. Oh tides, what do you bring? Do you carry grief or will you heal? Oh waters, oh tides, restore our plea, bring life, not sorrow on your way. Don't give up, Pini Majima. Pini ni kwa yo wakoro pini no owangi. Kima manam no me wabende ni kitore. Rachuo magpi, tonge yo kenji. Kwam Victoria nyaka Pacific to Waringo. This land called to us, but this world turned blind. The life the waters gave is now burdened with grief. The elders of the tides remember their voice. From Victoria to the Pacific, we rise to defend. Oh nam ikwayo ango kende koda richo dogi mabe opio nam dwamnisoa ketongima oke richo eyo. Oh nam ikwayo ango kende koda richo dogi mabe opio nam dwamnisoa ketongima oke richo eyo. Oh times, what do you bring? Do you carry grief or will you heal? Oh waters, oh tides, restore our plea, bring life, not sorrow on your way. Get don't give up, don't.
That was freaking awesome. See everybody on tomorrow night's show. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, folks.